Okay, welcome. Glad you're joining us today with our new program on Dr. Teach Me to Parent. And this is going to be an unusually good program for you today. It's a little special. We have many guests. We're going to try to get this all tied together because today we're going to be looking at the role of the deaf person in a family. In some ways, the deaf person is among deaf people. They're all deaf. Others were raised in a family that were speaking. So we're going to look at the influence on a deaf person and the deaf person's influence upon a family. And we're going to look at parenting from the perspective of the deaf individual, the deaf person in the family. So join us today as we enter into this little community discussion. And before we start today, I'm going to put in a little perspective and give you a little quote that I think is just kind of a neat quote for you to understand and just kind of think about, okay? Here's the quote. Greatness lies not in trying to be somebody, but in trying to help somebody. You know, and that's really kind of the essence of life. Is we often are challenged to be somebody we're not, to be somebody more than we are. But really the important is help somebody, and through that you will become the person that maybe you really would like to be. You'll certainly be a stronger person because of that. Now, let's take a look at our little community here that we have today as we introduce them. We're being aided here by Kathy Yoshida, who is interpreting for us, and you'll be catching a little glimpse of her a little bit throughout the program today. On my far left, we have Keith Catron. He's the pastor of the Bridge Deaf Fellowship, a church on Ashland Avenue, and he also teaches at Fresno State and teaches at Fresno Community College, Clovis Community College, I guess is the right word. So he's going to add a little bit of his perspective. He's a parent, and we're going to be looking at it not only from him as a deaf person, but also as a parent within the deaf family. And then we have Jimmy Bronson, who is a teacher at the Norseman's Elementary School. And we're glad to have you with us today, and lived in a deaf family, so going to add his perspective. He's a parent. He's going to give us his perspective as well. And then we have Rosemary Muncy, and Rosemary is a teacher, a professor at Fresno State. And we are all together, coming together with different backgrounds, different experiences, different perspective on this issue of deafness in our community, in our society. But let me ask you first, before we talk about your personal life and learning about you, what is the deaf community here in town? What is the number of deaf people in our community here in Fresno and our area, and maybe the nation for that matter? What's the data on that?
The numbers, I don't know. Your wife, Michelle, she's the executive director of DHHSC, Jimmy. But as far as that's the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Service Center here in Fresno, it's a wonderful agency, and Jimmy's wife is the director. So maybe, Jimmy, you know data better than I do. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say in Central California, from Monterey to Fresno, I think maybe 600,000 deaf and hard of hearing people. But most of those 600,000 are hard of hearing, and about maybe 10% are profoundly deaf. We don't have exact numbers.
But nonetheless, that's a large population of people who are hard of hearing in some level and have to use some type of sign language to interact with and deal within the community. So 600,000, that's a lot of people. And so today you're going to be speaking, to many of them, and maybe you're going to be speaking more to the hearing population who need to know about the deaf population, need to know what it's like to live as a deaf person, to how to live in a world that speaks and you don't, a world that listens and you don't. And so I want to hear about that just a little bit. Rosemary, give us a little bit of your own personal story. What's it like being a deaf person in your family as you grew up?
Yes, Dr. Hedberg. First, I want to I want to introduce a concept. 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 I want to introduce a con 90 to 95% of deaf children have parents who can hear. And 5 to 10% of deaf children have parents who are deaf. And I'm one of the 90%. My parents can hear. Jimmy and Keith both have parents who are deaf. They're within that 10%. So I'm within the 90% and they're within the 10% at the same time. About 20% of the parents who can hear know sign language. That's all, just 20%. And 1% sign fluently.
Okay.
1%. So that's a small percentage of parents who sign.
Is the family different when you have parents that hear versus parents that do not hear? Is that two different families, two different ways of living, or is it about the same?
My perspective is different than Jimmy's and Keith's, but think about a suitcase. Think about a suitcase. You open up the suitcase, and if the parents have a suitcase and they open it up, and if the parents are deaf, they already have the history, the language, they have the culture, everything ready. But parents who can hear, they open the suitcase and they don't have any of the tools to know deaf culture, language, or history or anything. And they're learning, they're finding out new information all of the time. So the baby is born, they are given this suitcase of a deaf child, and the parents who are born deaf, often when they meet their deaf child, it's just totally different journey for parents who are deaf and parents who can hear. And communication as well, because I'm sure the suitcase is heavy. And much of this, what's in the suitcase, relates to communication with children. Hearing parents have to start learning the fingerspell, and it's a step-by-step progress. And some parents never really learn ASL at all. They don't. So it's a big difference between parents who can hear and parents who are deaf when they have a deaf child.
That may be the way it is for the whole society, is that most of us come with an empty suitcase.
Yeah.
We have not any background to the deaf community, to a deaf person. We have to learn as we meet people and as we interact with people and learn as we go. All of us. We're all like that.
Yes, that's true.
So what is it like then, particularly, living in a family that does speak? Your parents do speak, and versus a parent who does not speak. Is there really a main difference there?
My parents are deaf. This is Jimmy speaking. I grew up in an oral family, and I didn't learn sign language until I was 20 when they went to Gallaudet. My parents grew up in the school for the deaf, so they learned to sign. And also, they're from, Keith is also from the school for the deaf, and I was in a mainstream program. My parents' experience growing up orally influenced their decision to raise me and my sister, who is also deaf, in a mainstream situation. They felt it was important to get as much as possibility, to take as much advantage of our speech skills as we could. It wasn't wrong, it was just different. It was just a different experience from what Keith.
Was it the right thing for your parents to do, or would you prefer that they do it differently?
I'm happy with how my parents raised me. When I visited the school for the deaf when I was 12 years old and I wanted to go, but I decided to stay in the mainstream program. I wanted to live in the cottage, but I lived with my parents during the week. In the residential school, you have to live apart from your parents during the week in a cottage. But the school for the deaf in Northern California is Fremont School for the Deaf.
Yes.
And my daughter is 16 years old, and she attends that school.
Yes.
And she's very, very happy there, and she's been there since she was in 7th grade. I made a decision for her different than the decision my parents made for me. Mm-hmm. My high school, there were 30 deaf students. So I did have some interaction with the deaf community, and that was important. At lunchtime, I would talk with my deaf friends. But then, when I went into the mainstream classes with an interpreter, I was the only deaf student in the class. I was able to compete academically, but socially it was difficult. So there was a much difference in academics and being socially interactive. So I was able to interact socially only at lunchtime. But my daughter has a different experience. She grew up here, and there's a small deaf program here, a few deaf children, and kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade, she had friends, she was happy, but then later it was very challenging because you know how girls are. They start chatting. They don't play. They talk. And my daughter, tried to socialize with these girls, but she didn't understand what they were talking about, and it was very depressing for her. So we went to visit the School for the Deaf, and she just got completely involved. She loved it. She said, I want to come to school here next year, and I want to go to Gallaudet University. So that's where she's been. Each person makes a decision for their
all
children.
A little different.
All
Everybody's
parents,
a little different, but they have to do it in their own way. Keith, let me ask you a question. I've often heard that mothers are the one that learn sign language in a home, and fathers often do not. Is that a true statement? What's the experience?
Yes and no. I know some fathers who really care about their daughter, and this father is just learning sign language as much as he can, and then the mother's not. So, but most often it is the mother who learns sign language, that's for sure, and the father doesn't. But sometimes both parents learn. The mother and father work together.
Well, let me ask you then, is this a problem? That if a mother learns sign language, let's assume your mother learned sign language, but your father did not, would you take that as a personal affront? Is that a hurt? Is that like a rejection? Is that like an abandonment? Is that like a walking away from you almost, abandoning you?
I don't know if you remember the movie from 1986 called Children of a Lesser God.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that with Marlee Matlin? The storyline in that movie, the father left the mother and abandoned the daughter and the mother.
Comment.
And so the daughter blamed the mother for the father leaving. And we see a high percentage of divorce in families that do that. They divide up. They make decisions about signing or not signing. It's really difficult.
I've heard that.
And deaf school, or not to go to deaf school.
Yeah.
These kinds of decisions cause problems in the family and cause difficulties in the relationship between parents. I feel parents don't want me, the child feels. I don't have a relationship with them. I don't have a place where I fit in. And there is a lot of struggle with self-esteem and thinking about suicide, alcohol addiction. All of these things come into play because all children need a place where they feel that they fit, where they get love, where they can be their own person the way God made us. They need to be valued and cared for. Communication is key to that. So we have to communicate, and then the relationship is possible.
So when a father does not learn sign language, that father is really walking away from the child or from the family. He's not investing, he's not bonding, he's not connecting with his children. And that's like a rejection.
Yes, when the father leaves, there's no communication, it means there's no relationship, so that's exactly right. And then Keith is talking, I noticed that some fathers have a hard time feeling a bond with their child because they feel like the child has a disability. The mothers love their children no matter what, but the father feels a little bit separated from the child because the child has a disability, maybe disappointed in the fact that they are disabled.
Well, let me ask you this then. What do you tell a father? You have a father listening today who has child who is deaf. What do you tell that father?
Take your son and daughter as who they are. Just accept them. Love them. Work with them. Work together. Don't avoid the child. Get along with the child. Do as much as you can for the child. And this is Jimmy. I'd like to add, take time for the parents. The parents need to learn how to sign. And sometimes the parents don't have the natural ability to learn how to sign, and they're a little bit, it's difficult for them to learn. But even if they try, that makes a difference. That makes a difference, even if they don't become fluent. And don't forget, we're very visual people. Show us. If you're struggling, cooking, baking, want to go out, show us, teach us how to fix a car, how to go fishing, how to cook. Whatever you're doing, take us with you so we can learn by watching, so we can be involved with you. If you don't involve us, we feel rejected. We feel rejected. And that's where communication comes in. Sign language is hard. It is a struggle, but please, like Keith and Jimmy said, it's important for parents to try to learn sign language so they can develop a bond with their child. Children, when they're young, it's not that important, but as they get older, it'll backfire if the parents don't learn how to sign. And also, I want to add, Rosemary said fishing. I'm not really a fisherman, to be honest with you, but my son, he's 18 years old. He loves to fish. And so I took him fishing a few times, and he complained, I didn't catch any fish. He kept asking me questions about it. So I realized he felt hurt, even though I didn't mean to hurt him. So what I did, I planned a fishing trip to Alaska with my son. So the two of us went we're going to go in 2 weeks so that we can, he'll get the message that I care about fishing.
That's a good word. That's a good word. I think fathers need to understand, and father, if you're listening, I think you really understand this, that it's not your fault if your child is deaf. This is not an impairment of you. This is not a reflection of something wrong with you, or that you sinned, or that you have done something in the past that now you're being punished in this way. That is not true. Just forget that kind of thinking. You've given birth to a child that happens to be deaf, but in all other ways, that child has as much potential to be successful and to achieve and to be part of the world and part of the community and contribute to the world and contribute to the community in the same way that you have that same opportunity. So look at it as a very great gift for you to raise and to challenge and to teach and to form and to shape into a very successful, person. Just as we see here, college professors, elementary school teachers, professional women and men, your child can be that. But it will be that only if you accept your child for who and what he is, and then raise him to become what he can become, what God has implanted within him, the ability to become a full person. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much for emphasizing that. We need that clear message to get out. And also, my parents can hear, and my mom signs, but my father, he knows the most important sign, which is I love you. That's the sign my father knows. My father uses that all the time. My father is a wonderful man, wonderful man. But it's important to have language access in order to build a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good spot. We're going to take a break. And we'll take a couple-minute break here. We have some commercials for you to watch. And come on back and join us in just a couple minutes. Go get a cup of coffee and join us in about 2 minutes as we take our break now. And we got a good question for you when you come back. And as we look at the peer group, how a deaf person interacts with the peer society at school, in his neighborhood, in his church, so that they become part of a whole community.
If your home floods, who will you call? When your house springs a leak, it's time to call Clean Master Emergency Flood Service at 559-213-9430. Clean Master will be there in 60 minutes to start fixing your home. And Clean Master bills your insurance directly, saving you the hassle because you've got enough to worry about. Clean Master also offers carpet and upholstery cleaning, carpet repair, pet odor removal, and more. Remember, Clean Master Emergency Flood Service, 559-213-9430, and visit cleanmasterflood.com. Pompe disease is a progressive, multisystemic, debilitation, and often fatal muscular disease. The United Pompe Foundation was formed to assist those affected by Pompe with the medical costs and other expenses that they may not be able to fully cover through their insurance. Visit UnitedPompe.com to learn more and to make a tax-deductible contribution to the United Pompe Foundation. Visit the beautiful city of Exeter and visit ExeterChamber.com. The Chamber's mission is to promote, support, and enable Exeter to prosper, creating a strong local economy, promoting community, and providing networking opportunities. Follow the Chamber on Facebook and Twitter, or give the Chamber a call at 559-592-2919. The Kern family of the Kern Family Farm invites you to eat delicious, nutritious, organic produce available at the Gnarly Carrot. Located at 32954 Road 222 in North Fork, California, the Gnarly Carrot is a local, natural, seasonally changing market offering a wide range of products from local Central Valley vendors. Get your caffeine fix, grab a smoothie, and support small businesses. Learn more at KernFamilyFarm.com and visit the Gnarly Carrot today. Doctor in Sukasa allows you to connect with your doctor when you need a quick treatment. Avoid a trip to a medical clinic or emergency room and connect by video with your doctor from your home, work, or anywhere. Just go to drinsukasa.com on your phone, tablet, or computer. Dr. in Sukasa provides quality care that is convenient, bilingual, and affordable, so you are never left without access to health care. Visit drinsukasa.com today.
Okay, welcome back, and glad that you now had your cup of coffee, and you can join us now for our second segment of our discussion here with the deaf community of Fresno, and what it's like to live in a deaf home. What is it like to be born as a deaf person? What is it like to have deaf parents or speaking parents? And what's it like to live within a community of school classmates, peers, that accept you or reject you or have difficulty relating to you? So we're going to talk a little bit about our peer relationships now in terms of how you got along with peers. And what we're doing today is we're interviewing the deaf community. Kathy Yoshida is interpreting, so you'll hear her voice once in a while. And we have Keith Catron, who is a pastor and also a professor at Fresno State and at Clovis Community College. Jimmy Bronson, who is a elementary school teacher at Northside. And then we have Rosemary Muncy.
Norseman, actually.
Norseman. And then Rosemary Muncy, who is a professor at Fresno State.
It's actually Juanice.
Juanice. Okay.
Fresno State.
Thank you. Okay, now here we go. What about peer relationships? Were you accepted when you went to school? Were you rejected? Did you have to fight your way to become accepted? Did you have to work hard to become accepted? Was that a painful time in your life as you grew up? Was junior high painful? Was high school painful? Elementary school? Any particular time? Just becoming accepted by the peers.
I had an easier time because I was not in a mainstream programs. I grew up in a school for the deaf, meaning that everybody in my classroom was deaf. The kids were all deaf, so all of my peer group communicated in ASL. But still, the peers have problems, even though they can communicate. It's the same kind of issues as anybody else. But the peers also have different backgrounds too. Even though their parents were hearing, my parents were deaf, some, but in the residential school, you just take what you have. You know, you live and eat and sleep with the same group of peers every day, and you just make the best of it. You just make the best of it.
Mm-hmm. What about the rest?
Jimmy's saying his experience is unique because he didn't come home on the weekend. He only visited his parents during vacations. So, you know, I think we need to emphasize that the peer pressure was probably more evident there because of that. But in my experience, I was in a mainstream program. I lived with my parents, and I went to public school, and I was in a deaf class. When I was young, in kindergarten, I was mostly with the deaf students, and then in first grade I was mainstream. So by the time I was in 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, I was mainstream all day. So, and I was upset when they told me I had to be in mainstream classes all day because I wanted to be with my deaf peers. They said that those classes didn't fit me, that I had to be mainstream. So that was a difficult challenge, but I had to accept it. So I took opportunities as much as I could to meet with my deaf friends in school. But the most challenging time was middle school because I was the only deaf person in the entire school. So 6th, 7th grade was difficult. 7th and 8th grade, I made 2 hearing friends, so we sat together and we were able to talk, but we weren't exactly the same. You know, the communication was a little bit different. I had a challenge lip reading, and they had a challenge understanding me, so it was difficult. But in high school, there were 30 deaf students, so I enjoyed school more when I was in high school. Plus, elementary school students, they don't really pay attention to deaf issues. You know, they just play. But in high school, there's more understanding. And in middle school, oh my gosh, it was so challenging. I was ridiculed for sure. But I got through that. I'm a stronger person because of it, though. So I think of it as a positive experience. But in my experience, I was born in Egypt. And my parents speak Arabic. They spoke Arabic only. When we moved to America, I was 9 months old. But I wasn't identified as deaf until I was 4 years old. And then I went for audiological therapy, and they told me that I had to have speech therapy and hearing aids. So I grew up in a private Christian school. It was a small school, and there were only 10 students in the class, so that was nice. So I was with the same teacher all day, so I was able to lip read her. I had 2 hearing aids, and I used my residual hearing. So from kindergarten until 8th grade, I was in that school. But my social skills were not that good. I didn't get invited to birthday parties. I wasn't asked to sleep overnight with my friends. And I remember my mom told me she would call people and beg them to please, can someone please play with my daughter? I didn't have any brothers and sisters either. And they all said no, 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 no. So I had few friends. Because I had to look at their face and lip read them and all of that. So communication was difficult. So as a result, that was very, very challenging. In high school, though, it was even more of a challenge because it was a bigger class, different teachers in each class. Trying to lip read in high school was overwhelming. It was the first time in my life I ever got a C. And then in college, it was even more worse, even more overwhelming. Then I realized that my hearing level, I started learning more about it. I was more assertive. So I asked people to take notes for me and for assistance. And I developed my own survival skills, asking friends to help me. But no one was supporting me. I kind of took care of myself. I learned sign language when I was 18, and it had a big impact on friendships because I was lonely. When I was 14, I was so depressed I wanted to die. I was just so lonely. And God showed me how beautifully and wonderfully and perfectly I'm made, that He made me. And finally I accepted who I was from that point on.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We have teachers, we have principals, we have superintendents watching. What is your advice to a school when a deaf child comes into that school? What's the advice that you give the administration, the teachers of a school? How should they handle that? Give me one or two things that you want the teachers to know and to do. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, the teachers at Fresno Unified already have a program for deaf and hard of hearing children. So if the child is identified as deaf, we have a referral program, and the child would first go to the Lorianne Infant Center, and then the child and the family will work together, and then they will make a decision about going into an oral program or going into a signing program, because we have both programs in Fresno Unified.
So that's good to have both have a choice. Which is the best one to fit?
Yes and no, because honestly, many times those who grow up orally later learn sign language and then transition into the signing program. You'll never see a person who's growing up signing and then transitions into the oral program. The bridge is one way. The bridge is one way.
Okay. Keith, what would you say to a school?
The important thing is education, but also it's also important to have peers, to have friends. Many parents feel if they place their child in a mainstream classroom by themselves as being the only deaf person, then when the child is in that situation, they can't interact with their peers. They have to think. It's important for a deaf person to be with their friends for support. So I strongly encourage that. My son, my second son, Chad, is deaf, and he went, we lived in Fresno, but Clovis Unified School District. And I refused to send my child to Clovis. I sent him to Hoover High School in Fresno because there's many, many deaf peers there. So I preferred him to be with his friends at Hoover High School instead of being mainstreamed into a program in Clovis where he would have been the only deaf child in the classroom.
I think that's very wise, because I think when a child is accepted by his peers, he'll learn, he'll enjoy school, he'll participate more, he'll be eager to go to school, he'll be more open to learning. Where if you go to a school where you don't feel like you're accepted, you don't have friends, you don't have associations, you're going to be depressed and you're not going to learn. Is that true?
Oh, yes, that's very true. Because the dream is that teachers and parents in schools feel like the deaf child should fit into the hearing culture, the culture that can hear, and that is a false dream. It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Parents want their child to be the same as them, and parents want their child to be hearing. Deaf parents want their child to be deaf. So you have to recognize that kids are different. If a parent can hear and their child is born deaf, they face a period of grief. It's natural, that they'll have a different life. And it's okay that it's a different life than what they had imagined.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to add, this is Rosemary, this is two words of advice for teachers, administrators. One is a high percentage of bullying happens in school with deaf children because they don't understand each other. You have a deaf child and a hearing child, they look at each other, they can't understand each other. They're different. They have, at first they think it's cool, but there's no respect, there's no exposure. The important thing is, from elementary school, from preschool, middle school, high school, all the way through school, is maybe sign language exposure, sign language clubs, sign language exposure. Not, sign language is like a foreign language. It's their native language. It's a heart language. It's not a foreign language. It's American, American Sign Language. It's important people recognize that. And that's going to reduce the bullying and increase the relationships if there's more exposure to sign language in school. Deaf children have to be exposed to deaf adults. If all of the teachers can hear, it's important to get the community involved in school. Maybe have some deaf people involved as aides, go on field trips with the students. And also we have a collective community. We need to work together. We need to share. We need to touch. We need to experience. We need to share stories. So maybe have deaf people go into the classroom, share their stories. And the behavior of the children is different because it's our culture.
I love that because that's what you're doing. You're sharing your story, and that will help all of us appreciate you individually, but you as a deaf person and the deaf community much more. Let me ask you, you mentioned about the bullying behavior that takes place in the classroom and the playground. Among the deaf community, is this a major problem? Bullying, drug use, drug addiction, alcohol, criminal behavior of various kinds? Is there a high likelihood of that happening? Or is the deaf community pretty good in these areas?
I think any community has challenges and frustrations. And any community like that, there's going to be an increased incidence of bullying and alcoholism and drug use. For example, in the deaf community, 75% of the people are unemployed. And many who are not employed become depressed and start to drink.
That's right.
The job opportunities are very limited for the deaf community. So they face some frustration, and they face bullying too. And it's a system problem. It's a system problem. What comes first, the problem or the system? So you have to juggle that. Mm-hmm. But the most important thing is available resources. Like for mental health, a deaf person who is drug addicted or has an alcohol problem, they need specific kind of classes, even parenting classes. Where do they go? Where do they go? People often don't want to provide interpreters. They don't want to provide instructors that sign ASL. So it's a constant struggle, and it's a cycle that continues, and this causes a lot of failure. And I'm proud that we have DHHSC, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Service Center here in Fresno, not just for the deaf, but for deaf family members as well. If they need counseling, if anybody in the community needs any kind of services related to deafness, deaf and hard of hearing, they can come to DHHSC.
I'm writing a online program now. It should be done in about a month on parenting. So it's on the computer, it's all online in different aspects of parenting. So the whole deaf community could have access to parenting class online. It'll be offered through Fresno Pacific University as part of their online program. That would be a big help, wouldn't it, for the parenting of the deaf family, parents.
I'm wondering, I don't really know how your program would be working, but will you have an interpreter on the screen, or how would that work?
All reading. So, no lecture, all reading. So then you read and learn. So we're going to have an answer to you on that problem. It's coming. But you spoke about counseling. Is there any counseling service, mental health service available in our community for the deaf? Are there any signing therapists at all?
Yeah, you have a social work background, Rosemary. You can answer. Here in Fresno, we have one therapist who signs, but that person has a private business, and so there's a limited number of people who have access. And we have a huge, huge need. Here in California, there's no specific mental health services. It's a huge problem, huge problem.
So let me ask this question as we kind of bring it to a close here a little bit, but you have parents that are watching, and some of them have deaf children in their family, some don't. They're just parents like anybody else. What is a good parent? How can a parent be a good parent, a better parent? What advice would you give them? Give them one or two pieces of advice. How can a parent improve and be a good parent?
There's two things that come to mind. First of all, love and care for your child. Doesn't matter if the child's deaf, care for that child. The child must feel the parent's love and care, because often what happens, if a child is born deaf, they have brothers and sisters or other siblings who can hear, and the parents pay more attention to them, and the deaf child gets left out. This can happen. So all the children need to be treated equally. And secondly, parents need to learn how to sign. They must learn how to sign. Must.
Fathers particularly.
That's right, that's right, that's right.
Let me ask you this. Where does a person go to learn? Where does a parent learn sign language?
My first suggestion is go to Deaf and Hard of Hearing Service Center. They have a program to teach sign language, and that it can guide the parents as to what they can need to do. So DHHSC is a wonderful resource, and it's free for the families. The classes are free for the families. And also, too, Break the Barriers has classes. Fresno City College, Clovis Community College has classes. Fresno State has classes. Reedley College, Madera College, Lemoore, West Hills.
So there's no excuse.
So
Every
ASL is
father
spreading.
can learn sign language. Every mother can learn sign language. Every sibling can learn sign language.
No excuse. And also church, too. The same with church. At the church that I pastor, most of the children that come to our church are CODAs. They're children who have deaf parents. But I think your daughter, Courtney, is the only one that is actually deaf. But we have actually 2 deaf children. But if the parents bring their children to church, because they can have deaf fellowship. They can have fellowship with other deaf people. So parents who can hear need to bring their deaf child to church. Because deaf children need a strong connection with deaf adults.
And that's one place in our community. Now, you are the pastor of the Fresno Deaf Fellowship. And you have a church of deaf people who meet at the Bridge Church on Ashland between First Street and Millbrook. What is it? Tell me about your services. When do you meet, and what's it like?
The church itself, we meet at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings, every Sunday. And all of the services in sign language. I preach in ASL, obviously. We also have a voice interpreter for anybody who comes in who can hear and doesn't know sign language. So we do have that interpretation services available. We have a program for children's ministry, and we place the children in the regular Sunday school classes, so we have that. And our church is wonderful. We have a leadership team that all works together. We have a lot of patience. We have many, many visitors who come, who can hear on Sunday, and they love the fellowship. They like taking time, talking and meeting with people. Sometimes the people who can hear stay and get involved in our fellowship. And we also have some parents who may feel uncomfortable coming at first, but we'd like to give them a warm welcome. All of the members of the church are caring people. And just know, parents, that if you do come to our church, we will take the time to spend with you and talk with you and welcome you warmly. I'd like to ask, Pastor Keith celebrated 30 years as our pastor. Can you imagine? 30 years ago? And you, Dr. Heber, you interviewed me 30 years ago.
That's
Do you
right.
remember?
That's
Do you
right.
remember?
I remember that. He came from Florida.
That's exactly right. You remembered.
remember.
Yeah.
Is it a church that is welcoming people? Do you want people to come? Even if
Yes.
they're not deaf,
Oh, yes.
but if they're interested
The
in
door-
sign language,
the doors
if they're
open.
learning sign language, should they come and just be there to learn?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. And deaf people, regardless of their signing skills, if they're oral, if they sign, or anything in between, anybody who has identifies as deaf or has a hearing loss is welcome. If you have struggles or if you're facing fear or joy, we're all human. We're all human. We need to share together our lives as Christians.
That would be true of all of us.
And also, like Pastor Keith said, the community tends to be a little bit older. If there's problems, with their faith, with their body, with their health, the important thing is how we teach children about God. How can we teach children about God without language? How do you teach them about beliefs and values and morals, right and wrong and all that? We must have language. So church becomes a community in itself. We provide information, and often a church members who come haven't had interaction with their parents to learn all of these things, learn morals and ethics and all of that. We need to have the character of God. So church is an important place for the community to learn these things about God.
I always say it like this, is
Yes.
that a parent is the first teacher and the most important teacher that a child ever has. But you made a very good point. If a parent cannot sign and is not proficient at signing, how can that parent be a teaching parent? How can that parent teach values and morals and skills and attitudes and values? How can a parent do that if they cannot sign? A parent has to sign. If they have a deaf child in the family, they have to sign. There's no excuse. There's no option. Would that be true?
Yes, I agree. 100%. 100%.
That's what it says.
Yes.
You can't be an
We would
effective
love
parent
that.
if you can't speak. Well, you all did very well. Now, one last question. Anything you want to add? Anything you didn't say you want to tell the audience today? Something you wanted them to know? What did you miss saying? Anything you want to add? Your own story or advice to parents or...
I have one word that comes to mind. Is sacrifice. Sacrifice. Often we as parents, we have to sacrifice something. We care for our children. We want the best for our children. And often I see parents who say, they want to learn sign language, but I don't have time, I don't have the money, I can't drive, I work. And I understand that. I do understand that. Again, it goes back to, as parents, we're responsible to make some sacrifice. We have to sacrifice now, temporarily, but in the long term, you keep the relationship. And this relationship becomes more valued. And as the child becomes 18, their interaction with their parents is going to be a lot less if the parents don't sign and they can't communicate with them because everything is so superficial. Yeah. So the deaf community becomes their family, so they spend more time with the deaf community and less time with their biological family. And also let parents know that 90 to 95% of deaf people will marry another deaf person. My wife is deaf, and Jimmy's wife is deaf. So 90 to 95% of deaf people will marry another deaf person, so they better learn sign language now. Maybe your son-in-law, if you have a daughter, your son-in-law in the future will be deaf, and then you may have deaf grandchildren too, you know?
That's right.
Who knows?
You have to start. You have to do it. Well, thank you for being our guest today. Kathy Yoshida has been our interpreter. You've heard her voice regularly throughout the program. We're grateful for her participation. And for Pastor Keith, thank you, Keith, for joining us. Jimmy, thank you for joining us today. And Rosemary. Now, Rosemary's been interpreting all along the way. She's been signing what I've been saying. So she hasn't just been sitting here trying to doodle. She's actually been sign languaging my voice and my speech while Kathy's then been interpreting to the others. So that's why you see all this movement and all this activity today. But we hope that it will work for you and that you got a good little flavor of the deaf community, the deaf person, the deaf family, the deaf parent, the deaf peer group relationship. This is a very major part of our community. 600,000 deaf people in our area of California. So we need to take notice and welcome these people in our community, be part of their community, and learning how to interact with them as best we can. Now, let me give you a quote before we end today, and this will kind of wrap it up our session today. Here's the quote. A heart enlarged by empathy, compassion, and sympathy never killed anyone. The world in which we are living today, with shootings going on and killing never happens by people with a heart of empathy, people with a heart of compassion, people with a heart of sympathy, people with a heart of trying to connect with other people, learn other people, and be part of other people's life. That killing never happens in that kind of a situation. So that's what we want to promote. That's the kind of lifestyle, and that's the kind of relationship we want to advocate for. People of empathy, people of compassion, and people of caring and sympathy. Anyway, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
The Green Gables Care Home is a 24-hour assisted living facility for the elderly located in Clovis, California, offering spacious private and semi-private rooms which are wheelchair approved, catering to the special person in your life who needs attention and wants to live in a loving home environment. The Green Gables Care Home has assisted living in secured homes for elderly with Alzheimer's, memory loss, and for your loved ones needing assistance with their activities of daily living. Call 559-297-9438 and visit greengablescarehome.com.
Sometimes good intentions hurt rather than help. For just $1.76 per meal, the Fresno Rescue Mission offers more than food. We offer hope. Please donate today.
Do you need a locksmith? Layman's Lock and Safe Service and Repair is available for you. 559-228-1805.
Gained a lot, learned a lot, and got a lot of love. If it weren't for the knowledge that I had gained from the classes at PCC, I probably wouldn't be the mom I am today. See, there it goes.
I would love you to meet my son, Aaron. My situation was very difficult. I didn't know how my life was going to turn out.
We graduated in June 2010, and we got married in July. And through family, the Pregnancy Care Center changed our lives.
The Pregnancy Care Center was a huge vital part in helping me walk through that pregnancy, in educating me and loving on me during that time.
Choosing a Medicare plan can be difficult and frustrating. Susan Hatch can guide you through the Medicare maze and help find the right plan for you. Susan helps people understand the confusing and drastic changes that occur every year in Medicare. Susan will only recommend plans that will protect your assets and allow you to continue to see your personal doctor. As a 100% independent agent, Susan is not controlled by any particular insurance company to steer a person onto any one particular plan. Susan was awarded the #1 Medicare supplement agent in California. Look for Susan's Medicare question and answers every Monday in the Fresno Bee. Call Susan at 559-307-2287 and visit MedicareToday.net.
CentralValleyTalk.